this video, we're going to try out some freehand work. In this case, I've got another Urban Mammoth miniature from the Urban Warfare game. You can see there's a nice little pattern here on the wings, but also a few other elements. We have some tattoos on the flesh as well. Another design element on the front, and even on the base there's a little more. So the idea here is to show you how to combine some different freehand elements just to make give a miniature a little more pizzazz. And there I have a base all set up for some of our freehand here, and I've got the miniature mounted on some dowel rods so that we can get to everything we need to. I've got it primed a neutral gray. Did that with a brush-on primer combining Vallejo black and white. And next thing I'll get to are some of the paint colors that are out here on the palette. Now some of these are for the base, some of these are for different elements of the miniature. I have a few of my darkest colors here. These are from Reaper. This is blue liner, this is brown liner. I really like these because they're very intense, really deep and dark. They're not quite as thick as your regular paints, but still not thin like a wash. So we'll use these in various places. We've got some Vallejo colors here, an intermediate blue, this highlight USMC. It's a nice way to highlight your gray without it getting too automatically blue. Get some ivory out here. This will be for some parts of our freehand, some highlights on the gun. Obviously we've got some reds here for the wings, deep yellow, this coat d'arms, flame orange. It could be really any orange, it doesn't matter. Some flat red and cavalry brown. And then I've got some olive green. Use it for the hair, for the gloves, a few other elements. And you might see these also show up on the palette. Got some flow improver. This is from Reaper. This really helps to thin down your paints and avoid some of the watermarks that can happen when you just use water to thin your paints. And the glaze medium, you have a benefit here in that your paint stays a little wetter for a little longer, not just on the palette, but on the miniature too. Now you can use a wet palette to keep your paint fresh, but it's kind of hard to do that with the miniature. And that's what this does. If you want to do any wet into wet blending, that's what the glaze medium is good for. Once you've poured through your reference books and made some choices about what kind of freehand that you want to do, sometimes it's a good idea to sketch it out, maybe on a piece of paper first. It's easier to try it in this larger size first instead of just going right to the miniature and then guessing, well, what do I want to do? Now, if it's a design you've done many times and you're familiar with, well, it's a different story. But if this is something new to you or you're trying a new pattern, you may want to test it out first. And that's what this next little segment here is about, testing. So here I've drawn out just a few quick little patterns. To get a pattern like this, I just kind of start out like this, just kind of feeling the design out, where it might go. Maybe I want to double up on that pattern. It depends. It can go up like this, go back down around. And then I can refine it more as I sort of hash out, okay, where's this gonna go? This can be filled in or not filled in. It can go this way. So this might be something, maybe it's on a cloak, or these are tattoos on a barbarian. This is kind of a classic for me. I like to use these as tattoos on barbarians. One of my favorite patterns. See, I can just kind of keep adding to it and intertwine and just keep building more and more to this pattern. Have it flow around this way. This is kind of a natural organic pattern that works well. It really, when you've got your brush, it's not all that much different to paint that on than what I just drew here. This is going to be a little more complicated, this knotwork. Now I've squared off the edge, so this is probably something that you would maybe have along the bottom edge of a cloak. And a few different ways you can approach that. So let's say this is the bottom edge of our cloak. Draw it like this, and we'll put a few X's here, and we'll do about that much. And we know we want one to cross over. It's going to be this one. We'll cross over. That goes under. This goes under. And now what we need to do is then attach these segments to each other like this. So we made a little bit of a guide for ourselves. And then the rest was just kind of playing connect the dots. That's what this knotwork thing is all about. Now you could have a rounded edge there. You know, you could have gone this way with it. Didn't have to be rectangular. It could be this way. And if you do it more in a sort of flowing organic method like this, well, then you could have put some spiky bits off of that. Let's say you could even put an eye in there if it's a certain chaos. You can even have a little eyeball in there. All of that starts to develop here on your preliminary sketch. It's a lot easier to create ideas, think about things, test it, say, I don't like it, than starting right on your miniature. Now here you know, I'm going to shade this a little darker to show the over and under nature of this. Just like we played connect the dots or added on to this, well, we could add on to this pattern here. So again, there's any number of things you can do. Expand on your design. Let's say we have a corner here, like this. A few different ways you can approach it. You can kind of do one of these little flowery type things that maybe has sort of connecting pattern like this. And that for a corner. Or let's say you've want something that's more square like this. Yep, that's where you could do, I think you've got these boxes like so with a little design in there. That could be a corner. So right away, just in a matter of a few minutes, we've already covered this thing with a whole variety of ideas for freehand. Now a lot of these that I've used here, these are some of the go-to designs. I said, well, I think I'm going to do this design. You can see it right here. This little pattern. No, but this was a modification because I wanted this to be. So I've got some of these little triangle things here. Well, I wanted to carry that motif sort of in tattoo form. So I kind of did something along these lines, but worked it into that general same pattern. So here's the arrow. but worked into the overall tattoo design. And now this is obviously much bigger than what it's going to be here. So you could also sketch it out here and then say paint it same size somewhere else. So let's just talk about the, it almost looks like kind of dragon scales. The pattern itself is not too difficult to establish. I'm almost thinking in terms of hexes or maybe octagons. I kind of vary the shape of it. Start out with one big one, and you can see almost like a little bit like cobblestone. As I start to connect smaller ones to that. And I sort of get smaller, but then maybe here, something that's bigger. Kind of go smaller here, somewhat bigger. So it's, see, it's not perfectly, not 6 sides exactly or 8 sides. It's not drawn with a ruler. I'm just kind of feeling my way around here. Maybe here it gets bigger again. And I'm building off of that first shape that I put down. Now I would suggest that this is a pattern you've never tried before. Well, just take a pencil, piece of paper, and draw this out. Just draw it out a couple times, just get used to it. Certainly, before you put it on a miniature. Now you can see how I kind of let the design fade as I was drawing it even. Well, that was practice for putting it on the miniature, because you can see on here it fades. It almost becomes lost in the overall color. That's the idea. See how it kind of just disappears, but it's stronger here. Stronger here, fades out. Here it's going to be maybe stronger over here. And then fades out again. So even at this point I'm already thinking, well, do I want this design to be 100% the same everywhere? Had I done that on this figure, this pattern would kind of overwhelm everything. It would overwhelm the shape of the wings, overwhelm a lot of your lights and darks, probably even overwhelm the actual person itself. Now maybe you want that if it's some sort of camouflage thing, like Harlequin, whatever. But here I want to keep this at least, well, somewhat under control, not too out of balance. Now as far as some of the freehand on the base, it's a little bit simpler. Just things like a basic numeral. And if you're going to do some numbers, I usually like to do double-digit numbers. I've got a couple of rectangles here, and then I'll start to think, okay, what number do I want? Let's make a 6 here. There we've got the 6. And let's maybe go with a 2 over here. So you can see I'm kind of loosely using those rectangles as a guide. Sort of connect the dots almost the same way as it was with some of the knot work. And now I'll intensify the lines that I want, leave out the ones that I don't. And you can see I changed the width of this tape. It wasn't, this is not the same width as my uprights. That tends to look a little more interesting, and especially maybe you want to give it more of a stenciled look. So then you would say, cut that off there, maybe cut it off here and here. Gonna get that eraser out again. So now, that's what I did on this base. You can see more of a stenciled look. So I'm gonna do take out some of the colors, do a test of kind of the dragon scales and also of these numbers. So first thing I'm going to do is just lay down some general color here and then let that dry. Got some of the olive drab and the intermediate blue. And just going to throw some of this out here. Pretend like it's either metal or concrete. And just sort of let that dry. In the meantime, I need some reds to work with over here. I'm going to do the same thing, just these, you'll have to just imagine these are like the surface of our wings. A little bit of red. Make that just a bit more orangey in some places. Some places even darker. This is going to be done at a larger scale, obviously, than on the miniature, because I just wanted you to get a kind of a feel for how that might work. Alright, and we'll let that dry. So as that starts to dry, now let's work on our numbering here. And I'm going to start blocking this in a subtle way. So I know I want, I'm going to go with the stenciled look. So I'm taking this liner brush and ghosting in the two, even letting it maybe disappear in some places. So I get watered down paint, because I want this to be kind of a worn number, kind of like the lines in a parking lot. And we've got the 6 over here. And just, again, not getting too intense with the white. Just kind of ghosting and you can barely see it. And that's how I did the 6 on the original base. Same thing over here on this side. I can always put more white over the top of it. It's a whole nother thing to try and get rid of the white once it's on there. So you can see both numbers, now they're starting to take shape. I may not even do much more on that part of the two. Kind of depends. Depends what I'm looking for. I want this part of the 6 to be a little bit more intense. If the numbers, if it's really important for you to see what that is, well, then you do add more white. You make it a bit clearer. But it's better if when you're doing a freehand design to keep the colors as subtle as possible. Sometimes it's not possible. So I can even go a little bit brighter here. And you can look at different fonts. I'm sure in most Word software programs, whatever, you got tons of different fonts that you can look at, and maybe you can study those and see one that works really well for you, and then just practice it just the same way we've practiced it here. So, right there, again, it's a nice little design. Wasn't terribly hard to create. I'm going to use the same brush. Now that we've practiced it in larger scale, you can always do it again. Smaller. This is more like the size that we're going to put on the base. See, the idea is the same. Kind of giving it that stenciled look. But yet still keeping it kind of subtle. So again, hopefully this is not not too difficult a thing for you to try first time around. This next design, this might be a little more complicated. I'm going to take some of the orange here. It's going to start out just like we did with the sketch. Find a spot. Start right there, and build off of it just like I did with the pencil, only this time with paint. And I think this is also a good demonstration of what the liner brush can do for you. You can see how often I have to go back to the palette to get more paint. Not all that often. I can keep going. And as the paint does start to run out, that's used to our advantage. Because remember, we wanted this to fade. So as the paint runs out the brush, it starts to already get less intense than our original, where we originally dropped the first part of our pattern. So we'll get some more. I'll rotate this around and start building in a different direction. Thinking this is where the design is going to be the brightest. So I'm going to build it along this way. Building it out. And one of the reasons this shows up is because you saw me putting down those dark colors to start out with, just like over here with our numbers. That's why I chose a paint scheme for the miniature itself that wasn't going to be super complicated. Essentially just a red, because it's not about, this video is not about painting flesh tones, it's not about painting metals. It's just to show you a few ways to approach freehand that might be a little less confusing, a little less daunting. Now it's a little more complicated the more interesting your surface is, like this, these wings, it can be a little more difficult than just doing it on this flat piece. That's why I advocate kind of training yourself here. Maybe try this thing out several times, 4, 5, 6 times. Get comfortable with it in 2 dimensions, because it will be a little more difficult when you have to wrap this around. So I'm not going to do too much more with blocking this pattern. I'm going to just stop just about there. Yeah, like so. Now it is time to get a little more of the orange in here. I go back to where I first started the design, and I'm going to start to pick out a few areas with this more intense yellow. So we're going to keep going, but just I think that's about enough for now. What I'll do is I'm going to take a bigger brush here, and I'm going to put in a few elements of some of these darker almost like scales. And I'm going to do that out here where the paint is lighter. And up here, again, where the paint is lighter. Not so much here where the paint's already dark. And I'll actually lighten that up a little bit so that I can, it's not, I want every spot the same color, because then it becomes too much of a repetitive kind of thing. It won't be as interesting.